Real quick, I am currently running a giveaway until the end of January for a Link's Awakening amiibo, with the option to be signed by myself. The link to enter is in the description. Enjoy! The most recent Zelda installment, Breath of the Wild, is by far the most fascinating and unique Zelda game in so many ways. From completely transforming the format of how the story and main quest is delivered to the player, to taking the series into an open-air world, allowing for 100% freedom when it comes to exploration. Something that had truly only been seen in the series back in the original Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Aside from changes to how the game is played and the story is delivered, Breath of the Wild really brought the world and its inhabitants to life, which is actually quite ironic considering the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic Hyrule. The developers did a phenomenal job with giving every little location or area a backstory, even if it's not directly told in game. A good example of this is all of the destroyed villages. Quite often they have their own backstory which you can figure out within the game, but isn't directly told to you. The same applies for all of the characters, villages, races, and smaller communities across the land. Anywhere you visit on your travels will have some history and lore to discover, along with the locals who Link can get to know and even create bonds and relationships with, including the goodest of good boys. This is one of the reasons I love Breath of the Wild, and whilst it's not my favourite Zelda game, it's definitely the one I admire the most in terms of the depth and thought put into literally everything. One of my favourite examples of this is how much backstory and life was put into the Sheikah. Up until Breath of the Wild, the Sheikah were a very mysterious and unknown tribe and race of people. They have only made solid appearances in Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword, but also make a very subtle and unconfirmed appearance in Twilight Princess. The Shadow Folk's return in Breath of the Wild really gave us a good insight into the once mysterious tribe. We got to learn about the leaders and important people of the tribe, the history of the tribe, and even use their technological creations to aid the quest of taking out Calamity Ganon. But there is something else about the Sheikah in Breath of the Wild that really interests me: the research labs. More specifically, the giant telescopes attached to the exterior and interior of the labs. What are they used for? There is no explanation given to us in the game as to what Robbie and Purah used them for. Considering the labs are for research and testing Sheikah technology, it's possible these two telescopes were also used for the process of developing technology, or just researching something. But what exactly were they researching? In today's video, that is exactly what we shall be discussing and theorizing. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get into the theory. Let's begin by directly inspecting the telescopes and seeing what they are all about at face value. As you probably already know, there are two Sheikah Tech Labs in Breath of the Wild, one atop Hateno village and the other on the northwest cliffside of Hyrule. We'll begin up in the northwest of Hyrule, in the Akala region. Up on top of the northern Akala cliffs is the Akala Ancient Tech Lab. If you approach from the hill linked to the East Akala stable, you will have to get past a decayed Guardian. Once closer to the lab, you get a look at, without lasers beaming towards you, something that often gets overlooked with this lab, and that is that it's actually a lighthouse, or was a lighthouse. The tech lab was built into it due to the lighthouse suffering significant damage from Guardian attacks, along with some lighthouse remains both inside and outside of the lab, most notably the light source itself that has been left smashed and rusted into the ground. The Akala lab is definitely a bit rough around the edges, with all of the Guardian remains surrounding it, rubble from its lighthouse days, and just general mess and waste surrounding it, but it does the job. The interior of this lab is as you'd expect from the outside. It's basically a workspace lab built into a hollowed out lighthouse. All of the wooden supports, beams, ceilings and stuff are all built into the remains of the lighthouse. However, if we inspect the room closer, there is nothing that really relates to the telescope and its purpose. Just a lot of generic notes, books and equipment. There is, however, one piece of paper that caught my eye in the room. This note page with a circle and an X, which looks like two locations being marked down, possibly one being the lab and the other being the aim for the telescope. If we move up to the second floor, we begin to get a better look at the telescope itself. We can see these massive clogs connected to the main wooden pillar of the lab holding up the telescope. With the way they are all aligned and set, this tells us that the telescope can in fact be moved, not just with the angle but also rotational, as there are more clogs just below the floor. We can then make our way onto the fully added on construction platforms, which also included a sort of grabber claw which has a guardian solidified in its grasp. This isn't too out of the ordinary, as the lab is used to research Sheikah Technology. There isn't really much else going on up here until you climb up to the technical 3rd and 4th levels of the lab. From the 3rd level, we can see that there isn't anywhere to look into the telescope from the end you'd expect there to be an eyepiece, just a rounded off end. If you move up to the 4th level, you can actually walk onto the telescope itself. This leads you to a sort of lookout platform on the peak of the telescope. It's also stated in creating a champion that this little platform here is for Robbie to sort of relax. More on that later. It's clear already that the setup for this telescope needs to be developed further, but I guess you could say the same for the entire lab. On this little platform is a deck chair, umbrella, a box, a mask of sorts similar to the one we see Robbie wearing, and a chalkboard with some notes. Oh, and a Korok. It's a little bit hard to make out what the notes actually are. It appears to be some sort of sketch or drawing of what I guess to be ruins or a construction plan for the lab, so there isn't really much info within the lab about the telescope, not even in the research books and diaries. So all we can do for now is position ourselves on the end of the telescope, and set a marker on the map where it's aimed at. The Akala telescope appears to be pointed at Death Mountain, but a little bit off to the side, further down the mountain. Although with the rotational mechanic, it's possible it was intended to be moved around Death Mountain, possibly monitoring Divine Beast Varadania. It could have also been used to look at the Lomi Labyrinth Island, or look out to the Akala Citadel. Thankfully, Breath of the Wild's creating a champion book sheds some more light on the matter. It states that in the concept phase of designing the Akala Tech Lab, it was planned that the eyepiece for the telescope was going to be in a sort of control room box on the 2nd floor, but that didn't make it into the final game. This could suggest it either got destroyed during the Great Calamity, or was never built into the game for the final cut. Moving down to the southern east coast of Hyrule, we can find the Hateno Ancient Tech Lab. This lab sits at the highest point of Hateno village, arguably just outside the village. The entrance is a double door which leads you straight into the main room. You can find a Sheikah slate pedestal, a table with some research notes, and a lot of books in here. Looking around the room, I can't see any notes or photographs related to the telescope outside. There isn't even anything within the research notes that you can read about the telescope. If you head outside and head up the steps built into the lab, passing the telescope, which we will come back to, you will make your way into Simon and Pura's room. Simon's is a very basic room, with not much for us to see, and whilst it's cool that Pura has her own bedroom on top of the lab, there is nothing helpful in here either. This brings us back down to the telescope alone. From a closer inspection, we can see that the telescope is fully external and outside of the lab, only connected to the lab by wooden beams and support planks. If we make our way to the telescope's platform, we can see that this one actually has a little sight to look through, along with a box stool and small umbrella. It's a little bit more empty than the Akala telescope, but does have an eyepiece, something the Akala telescope doesn't have. If you line yourself up with this telescope and get as close to the angle it's pointed at as possible, and then hit the marker button on your map, it marks Satori Mountain. And like the Akala telescope, I double checked this on the map by drawing a straight line across from where the telescope is, and what would you know? The Hateno telescope is pointed right at Satori Mountain and lines up perfectly, and it's even on the side that famous blue glow appears when the Lord of the Mountain is present. So perhaps the Hateno telescope was used for researching Satori Mountain and its landmark glow. Interestingly enough, the telescope at the Hateno lab is actually set in stone as previously mentioned. This one does not have a mechanic to adjust the angular position, making the Satori Mountain possibility all the more likely, but we will come back to that shortly. Also, unlike the Akala Tech lab, creating a champion doesn't provide much information on this telescope. Stepping away from the telescopes for a moment, it could be helpful to ask around the local areas to find out if any of the residents know what's going on at the labs. In Hateno Village, there are 4 characters who can give us a bit of insight, or lack of insight. 2 Hylian ladies named Nikki and Amira can be found next to the Eastwind General Goods Store. If Link talks to them, they will get a little bit annoyed and accuse him of eavesdropping and being rude, thus ending the conversation. However, if Link hides behind the water trough, he can actually eavesdrop on their conversation. The 2 ladies are discussing the tech lab. Nikki mentions how her child was talking about the lab, telling her about a young girl was seen in and out of the lab, followed by Amira saying that's weird and thinking the young girl could be adopted. Then Nikki goes on to state how the director of the lab doesn't seem like the adopting type, and then goes on to question the matter further. The ladies are of course referring to Pura when they say young girl, and the director is Simon. This would indicate that they don't know Pura is actually an adult whose self-experiment made her smaller and more childlike, meaning not much info or news ever breaks out from the lab. The other 2 characters are Azu and Sefaro, 2 of the local children who like to run up the hill, past the farm, and just below the long walk up to the lab. They can be found spying on the lab from 2 trees. If you go up and talk to either of them, they say stuff along the lines of, "I wonder if we'll see her today." That girl, I mean. Followed by yelling over to the other to check if they have any info. Sefaro herself says, "A girl from the Sheikah tribe. Is there really one there?" and even considers heading up there to investigate further, but stopped by Azu as he replies by saying his mother says he shouldn't get too close, meaning there is some sort of stigma around the lab being unsafe or just too unknown to go near. Also, if you stand in front of Sefaro, she will get a little bit angsty because she can't see the girl from the Sheikah tribe. Then tries to retract saying that as if she was a spy. Whilst this is just children being curious, as children do, it's natural, it does tell us that the locals know next to nothing about the lab, other than it's run by Sheikah tribe members, but to them in a sort of dangerous way, as the locals don't want to go near it. This is also true vice versa, as if you walk halfway up the hill to the lab, there is a sign saying no soliciting, but nothing to say you can't just visit. As for the Akala locals, there is only one person I could find who has some knowledge on the Akala lab. A resident of the East Akala stable called Nobo knows a little bit about the lab. She says this if Link asks her about farther lands in the Akala region from the stable. She tells Link there is a lighthouse looking home north of here. No one was there when she last stopped by though. That doesn't make too much sense as Robbie and Jaren are there 24/7 when we visit. Even Robbie's son, who can be found in Terrytown after it's completed, Grante, has no info to share. Essentially, we know next to nothing about the giant telescopes. There is nothing within the labs to help us out, none of the locals really know much, and the owners of each lab don't tell us much in the matter either. This takes us back to what they are aimed at. As the Hateno telescope is set in stone, we will go there first. As previously mentioned, it is directed right at Satori Mountain, right on its famous glow. The reason they could have been inspecting Satori Mountain is because of the glow and the Lord of the Mountain, or to keep tabs on the adventurer who once lived on the mountain. I'd say the chances of the telescope being used to research Satori Mountain and the supernatural activity that occurs there is pretty likely compared to the other reason, as the mountain is very visible at night when it's glowing, and a sight like that is definitely going to create curiosity, especially for scientists and researchers, like Pura and Simon. The region locals of Satori Mountain don't know much on it regarding the Sheikah either, so for the time being, we will safely assume the Hateno telescope was used or is used to research Satori Mountain and its nighttime phenomenon. There is also the slim chance that the blue-greenish glow the mountain gives off is connected to A. Sheikah power, which is also blue but much deeper, or B. the spirit energy that's been seen in the sequel trailer, Luminous Stone, and even the spirits of now past characters. But my money's on it being researched towards the mountain itself and everything that occurs there due to its magical and mysterious vibes. Moving back up north to Akala, it gets a bit trickier, as we can see in the game and are told in creating a champion that this telescope can be rotated and positioned, a much more dynamic telescope compared to Hateno's. There are only 3 real points of interest for research in my opinion: the Akala Citadel, the Lomai Labyrinth Island, and Death Mountain, which does have a divine Sheikah creation, Divine Beast Varudania. It could have been used to monitor Varudania whilst Link was still asleep in the Shrine of Resurrection, and Rudania was still patrolling the mountain under the influence of Calamity Ganon. Or it could have been used to double up on the purpose of the Akala Citadel, serving to look out for incoming travellers from lands across the sea, ensuring if there was trouble from the northeast coast of Hyrule, they'd be able to spot it and make everyone aware of it before it ever reached central Hyrule. The telescope may have been used for that, although the only possible issue with that one is that the lab was established shortly after the Great Calamity, which wiped out the Akala Citadel as well, and didn't really become a proper lab until during Link's slumber, so that somewhat writes off the Citadel connection. Lastly, it could have been used to research the labyrinth in the sea. It is Zonai made, but there is also a Sheikah shrine within it. Perhaps there is a bigger story here that we just don't know yet. Also, a cool detail to note is that the icons on the map for each lab is in fact a telescope, possibly hinting towards the telescopes originally being planned to serve a bigger purpose or have a bit more story to them, like most of the niche or smaller details in the game. The most likely option here to me would be keeping an eye on Rudania during Link's slumber, just to ensure Rudania didn't decide to come down from the peak of Death Mountain and potentially threaten and endanger Goron City, or the Elden and Akala region in general. This is one of those mysteries that doesn't have a clear-cut answer, but something I enjoy throwing my ideas around in and my thoughts on the matter. Be sure to leave a comment below on what you think the purpose of the Sheikah telescopes are. I look forward to reading your thoughts and getting a discussion going. Thank you all so much for checking out the video. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe for more Zelda content. I gotta say, the support recently has been absolutely amazing, and I can't say this enough, but thank you all so much. A big thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters, as your support helps me run the channel week in, week out. Thank you all so much. Again, thanks for watching the video, and until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.